In today's video, I'm going to show you how you can go from this to this. Hey guys, welcome back to another new video, and I'm going to start with the don'ts first. And as you can see, the first thing that I do is I am starting with a very rough outline and it is very dark, and I don't have any definitions for the hair direction or the different hair sections that I can see in the reference. There is nothing at all. It is just a basic rough outline, and this is my mistake number one. The second mistake that you see me do is use a really blunt pencil, and as you know, it's not going to fill out the grains of the paper at all. And the third mistake is that I am using a darker color straight away, so I'm not giving any thought about the highlights at all. So now it's going to be really difficult for me to bring out that highlights, as you can see. The fourth mistake that you can see me do is I am going in all sorts of directions. There is no defined pencil stroke at all, and also I'm not giving any thought about the direction of the hair, like where the hair moves and how the hair is flowing. I'm not giving any direction to the hair at all. It's just random motions up and down, right and left, and that's it. That is exactly how you should never draw your realistic hair. Forget the word realistic. It doesn't even look like hair, does it? It just looks like a block of color here and there of some random colors, and that's it. You don't see any definition at all. You don't see any individual hair strands, and you definitely cannot see any highlights at all. So this is the perfect way of not drawing hair. And of course, I might have exaggerated because people don't draw this bad. But yeah, this is basically how you should never draw your hair. Now let's see how you should draw your hair. For the first thing, you need to start with a very detailed sketch. And what I mean by that is take a close look at your reference. You can clearly see some areas are going to be lighter and some areas are going to be darker. And you need to sketch that out in your first initial sketch itself. Also, you need to take a note about the direction that the hair is going to go. If the hair is styled, then obviously it's going to have some direction to it. So you need to mark that in your initial sketch itself. Once you're happy with your sketch, once you're satisfied with it, you can go ahead and lighten that sketch even further with a kneadable eraser. Step number 2 is to choose your colors, and as for the colors, you will definitely need a very lighter shade, a mid-tone and a darker shade, and also some transitional colors in between. Once you have that, the fourth step is to sharpen your pencils. Now with the lightest color and a very sharp pencil, I'm going to block in the highlights first. And you need to do this because with color pencils, if you accidentally add any darker shade to any highlight, then it's not possible to bring back that much bright of highlight. So it's always better to preserve highlights from the starting itself, and that's why I'm starting with a very light color. Once the highlights are in place, I'm going to start moving on to the other areas as well, and I'm going to start with the lightest color first, and then I'll move on to my darkest color. Once the highlights are in place, I'm going to move on my next darkest color, and that is this color, and I'm going to block in all the areas where I can see some transitional shades to the darker colors, and that's what I'm doing right now. Once that is done, I'm going to start with the darker color, and I'm going to start blocking in the shadows and the darker areas that I can see in the reference image. I do this because I want to have a clear difference between the highlighted areas and also the darker areas, so that it will be easier for me to add any intermediate or transitional colors. And as you can see, just after a few minutes of adding this darker color, the hair is looking much more defined, and also I can see the highlights better, so it will be easier for me to maintain those highlights. And now that I have a very clear definition of the highlights and the shadows, I'm going to move on with my intermediate shades, and within just a few minutes the color of the hair is going to be totally different because I'm going to be adding lots more color and it's going to become much more saturated. The main thing that you need to notice is that I'm not drawing anything in pencil strokes. I'm not giving any details at all. I'm just blocking in all the colors that I can see in the reference, and I do this because I want a base layer so that once I'm happy with the base, I can move on to much more details later on. So this is just a base layer. I'm just establishing all the colors that I can see in the reference, and that's the only thing that I'm doing right now. No details, no pencil strokes, just simple shading. And that is going to fill out the grains of the paper so that it will be easier for me to add highlights without any grainy look. And another important thing that you need to do at this stage is to add all the hidden hues that you can see in your reference. For example, I can see a little bit of blue color in some parts of hair and some brown color in some parts of hair. So this is the stage for me to add that. This is our base done, and as you can see, there is a lot of definition in the base itself. And now I'm going to sharpen my colors and I'm going to start with the details. Just as I did in my base layer, I'm going to start off with the lightest color first and slowly and gradually I'll move on to my darkest color. But for this time, I'm only going to add in small pencil strokes and I'm going to move along the direction of the hair. And what I mean by that is, suppose if the hair is going to go in this kind of an S shape, then my pencil stroke should mimic that S shape, just like I'm showing you right now. Just like I showed you, I am going to move along the direction of the hair for every single color that I'm going to use from now on. And also, exactly like in the base layer, once I'm done with the lighter shade, I'm going to move on with the darker color. But this time, since I already have the highlights and the darkest areas established, I'm going to build up the intensity in layers and I'm not going to go with the darkest color just yet. I'm not going to use black just yet. I'll use it as a last thing. So for now, I'm going to build up the intensity in layers. Another important thing, probably the most important thing for you to do, is practice patience, because any realistic drawing is going to take a lot of time because you have to do a lot of work to it. You need to build the layers and you need to work in layers, so it's going to take a lot of time and you need to practice patience. If you're someone who gets agitated or irritated for sitting too long, for doing the same thing again and again, then take a break. Come back to the drawing with fresh eyes and start again. As you can see, just after a few layers, the hair is actually looking much more realistic than it was before, isn't it? Now that I have quite a few layers of color, I'm going to burnish all the colors together with a lighter shade. And as I said in one of my previous videos, I'm going to use a lighter shade than the area that I'm going to burnish. For example, I'm going to use gray to burnish all the areas that I can see brown or black shades. And also, I'm not afraid of burnishing at this point of time because I have added lots more layers of texture in there, and just by burnishing at this point of time, I'm not going to lose all of it. And this is just going to make the colors look much more intense and much more saturated, and the details are going to look much more clearer once I burnish. Even though I burnished, I'm still adding lots more color on top. I'm still adding lots more texture. So burnishing is not the final step. And now with a white pencil, I'm going to add highlights. But keep in mind, this is not going to be a very bright highlight. It is going to be a subtle highlight. Because in reality, you don't see any white spots or white streaks of hair as a highlight. It's just going to be more muted, much more subtle. And this is a really good way of doing that. For some more highlights, I'm going to use a Tombow stick eraser and I'm going to lift off some of the color pencil and it's going to reveal some bright highlights. But then again, it's not going to be bright as white, but it will be subtle and it will be natural, and that's what we want. Whenever you use an eraser for some highlights, you should always go back in with your pencil and blend that highlighted part with the rest of the hair, because otherwise it's just going to look like a patch erased from the hair. Now is the time to add flyover hairs, because in reality the hair is not just a block, it is made up of lots of individual strands, so not all strands are going to go in the same direction. Something is going to go in some other direction, some opposite direction, so you need to draw that as well. So if you don't do that, it's not going to look natural, it's not going to look realistic at all. Now for some brighter highlights, I'm going to use an X-Acto knife. This is quite risky, so be careful with yourself, don't injure yourself, and don't damage the paper and also your drawing. What I'm basically doing is that I'm scraping off the top layer of color pencil to reveal some brighter highlights, and this is going to be really thin, and it is an extremely easy way to add any bright highlight. The main thing about this technique is that it only works when you have enough layers of color pencils on the paper. If not, it's not going to work at all. In this section, I'm going to use the X-Acto knife to pull out some highlights. As you can see, I'm not holding the X-Acto knife vertical to the paper or horizontal to the paper. I'm actually holding it at a certain angle so that it will be easier for me to pull out the highlights. With this technique, you can add really detailed highlights to your finished drawing. But always keep in mind that this only works when you have enough layers of color pencils already. And if you don't have an X-Acto knife, then you can use this really cheap knife that you can find in a store near you and hold it at an angle and scrape off some of the color pencil, and it is going to work as well. With this technique that I showed you right now, I'm going to add lots more flyover hairs and also some highlights here and there to make the drawing look much more natural and much more realistic. After some finishing touches, this is how the drawing looks like. I hope you found today's video useful. If you did, do give this a big thumbs up, and as always, let me know what you think in the comment section down below, and you can share your work with me on Pinterest or Instagram. I'll leave links to that in the description box down below, and thank you so much for the support that you're showing towards this channel. Until next time, bye everybody.